If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, people who claim to have encountered aliens, dimension slips, lost time, otherworldly woods, supernatural, etc. What's your story? In 1999, my friend and I were in the back seat of the car, driving from Boulder to Nederland. We come over a hill, and there appear three massive, perfect columns of blue light stretching from the ground to an infinite height a few hundred yards off of the road. My friend and I start yelling at our friends in the front seat, "Look! Look!" and pointing them out. The friends in the front seat just kept chatting to themselves, completely ignoring us. A few minutes later, after we had passed the lights, they finally acknowledged us. They said they did not hear us yelling about UFOs for the past 2 minutes. They said they didn't hear anything from the back seat at all, which would have been impossible. Really ducking weird and frustrating. Around 9 p.m., I was walking through a local nature trail. There aren't many animals in this particular reserve, common birds, squirrels, and the like. If you walk all the way into the deep woods, maybe a bear or two, but other than that, not much that you haven't already seen in your backyard. So, all of a sudden, there's this shrill ducking scream, and at that point, I'm sort of getting scared because it's cold, it's dark, and there wouldn't be anyone out there at this time, and there are no animals that I know of that would make such a sound. On my right side, into the shrubs, there's this figure rustling in the underbrush, about 5 and crouching. It was too dark to make out what it looked like, but it kept making these weird bit out of glitter. We stopped on a high rock, and when we turned around to continue our way up the trail, we saw this little person about 200 meters away from us. We stopped cold and didn't move for a while, then the little person kind of waved and started walking at a high speed towards the forested part of the park, away from the Rocky Mountain. I will never forget, and to this day, I avoid going hiking by myself or late at night. I couldn't sleep for a few days. I was on a midnight drive with 2 friends. We're traveling down this highway when, all of a sudden, everything goes pitch black. Even though there were no street lights, I didn't realize how much ambient light there was until it was gone. Dashboard lights. Gone. Tail lights of the cars in front of us. Gone. Headlights from the cars behind us and the cars going the other way down the highway gone. All in an instant. I was riding in the back seat, and I remember waving my hands in front of my face to try to see something. I could feel that we were still moving, and it felt just as fast as before. I have no idea how long it was dark. It was long enough for me to try to figure out what was going on and to worry about running off the road. When all the lights returned, the car was silent for a while. I wanted to ask the other guys what they thought happened. If they thought we were abducted or something, but what if it was just sitting down on the couch doing nothing? So yeah, they both saw the same man sitting on this couch, and they told each other after they'd both seen it. Weird. I was out at night helping my friend with some bits and bobs, setting up, etc. We were filming an old run-down shed thing that was occasionally used by homeless people for some horror project he was working on. There were 4 of us going all together, and we were all around 17 to 18. Anyway, it's in the middle of the woods at night. I wasn't sure how long we'd be, so I packed a drink, some snacks, and this weird combined radio and torch. The radio had never worked, ever, even when new, but the torch was good, and it was the only torch I had to hand, so I packed it. I meet up with the others, and we trudged through the woods towards the old shed. We were walking for about half an hour, and I realized how quiet it was in the background. Other than our talking, there were no sounds whatsoever, no nature sounds, nothing. We get to the shed and start setting up, and one of the other guys mentions how quiet it is, and all of a sudden we hear what could only be described as a pig squealing, before the radio on the torch comes on at full volume with static and a foreign language for about 10 seconds and then goes off again. Then silence again. We quickly filmed what we needed and booked it out of there. I had never been able to get the radio on the torch to work before or since then, and I have long since lost it. It still freaks me out how quiet it was that night. I used to live in Georgia when I was starting 6th grade. The bus stop I waited at usually had 4 to 5 kids there, but this morning it was just me and Bubba. His nickname was Bubba. It was a real, quite foggy, but just a really gray late fall morning. I said good morning when I got there, then stood side by side. We were both just staring into the wall where the woods started across the road, and we were both quiet. After a few minutes, I saw this enormous bird fly out of nowhere. It was so large and black. I thought it was a vulture, but it was so freaking big considering how far we were. It was just beyond the tree line into the woods, flying along it. It flew about 50 to 60 feet, more like hovering, and only flapped its wings twice. But it was like watching a cartoon. It just disappeared as it flew behind a tree. I was just standing there for minutes after, like, WTF did I just witness? Did I just imagine that? Bubba breaks the silence and says, did you see that, or am I crazy? I just exploded, like, WTF? And we were, like, trying to discuss what just happened. I was young, but I wasn't stupid. I'm aware of how big birds can be. Even at that age, I'd seen big birds before with huge wingspans. This was just freakish and cartoonish and didn't move right. I've tried to brush it off, like maybe it was just a big black vulture, but everything about that event was just off, and I think about that a lot. I was new to Georgia, but Bubba grew up there. When I looked into his eyes, I knew this was different. You know that feeling that someone is staring at you? Imagine that, but tenfold, like a group of people were all suddenly staring at your neck. I got that feeling twice right before something went wrong. I called it the eyes when talking about it with my friends. The first time was when I was walking in thick snow with my then dogs, and it stopped me in my tracks. My dog didn't stop, and only a few steps ahead, he fell through ice into a body of water I didn't know existed in the area. I still don't know if it was a little river or a pond because I didn't stay to check. I had a dog to pull out of the water and rush home so he didn't freeze, and when I tried to find the same place in the summer, I couldn't find any water where I thought I had been. The second time, I got that feeling in a forest again but ignored it. The ground gave away under my leg, and my leg got momentarily trapped in some kind of animal tunnel. I twisted my ankle real good and had to hop home while using a big tree branch as a cane, but it was fine in the end. I have gotten the feeling since, and I just bolted out of the situation now. I don't know if my animal instincts are just on point when it comes to whether the ground under my feet is sturdy or not, but that feeling of being stared at is horrifying, and it just feels very unexplainable to have known something was about to go bad just before it did. Between the ages of 4 and 6, I would always talk to myself when I was in the kitchen. My parents would ask me who I was talking to, and I would say a little boy. This went on for a number of years. One day my parents were driving back from an evening with friends, and it was dark. Just as they went to pull into the driveway, my mother slammed on the brakes. She had seen a little boy run out of the front door of our house and into the road in front of the car. Not only this, but it had instantly flashed daylight at the same time. Like an old movie flashing in front of her face. On top of that, my dad turned to her and said, "Did you see that?" And recounted that he had seen exactly the same thing. For the record, neither of them had been smoking anything. After that, I never spoke to the little boy again. A few weeks ago, when I was now 22, a neighbor from across the road came over to borrow some sugar. My mom invited her in for a cup of tea. This is Britain after all, and they got chatting. It turns out she's lived on the road for 45 years. They began talking about new street measures that were coming in on our road, my mom pointing out they were good, even though in the 20 years she'd lived on the road there hadn't been an accident. The neighbor then went on to say, a few years before we moved in, that a little boy, of about 6, who lived in our house heard the ice cream man coming and ran out of our house, through the gate, and straight out onto the street to get an ice cream, only to be hit by an oncoming car in the opposite direction, just where, 16 years ago, both my parents had seen the same thing played out in that quick flash of broad daylight late at night. Creepiest SHT ever. Synchronized visions on behalf of both my parents? Both recounting something that had happened on the street? And I have never talked to my imaginary friends since? Goosebumps whenever I'm back in this house now. In my bedroom when I still lived with my parents. They were separated acrimoniously under the same roof, and my bedroom wall was also a wall for my dad's bedroom. One night, I woke up with a start at about 2 a.m. It was really windy outside, and I could hear it howling as it did down the street. With the wind came the strongest sense of foreboding. I felt like something bad was rushing towards our house. I clung to my blankets and held my breath. Then, in the corner of my room, where I shared a wall with my dad, I saw this face appear. It was like a hologram. I could see the cabinet right through it. It was this giant, evil-looking demonic face, sort of upside-down triangle-shaped. It narrowed its eyes at me and dropped its jaw impossibly low in this snarl at me. I freaked right the duck out, just staring at it. Then I scrunched my eyes closed and started breathing deeply, imagining white light around myself and thinking, just ignore it, just ignore it. After what felt like forever, it was like a weight lifted out of the room, and I peeked out from my blanket, and it was gone. The next day, I told my mom that something freaky happened in my room and I didn't want to sleep in there again, so she was like, okay, you can take where I've been sleeping in the study, and I'll sleep in your bed. So that's what we did. The next morning, she walked with me to school, and after a few minutes of silence, she said, "You know, I saw the strangest thing in your room last night." Then she proceeded to describe exactly the same face I saw. She slept in another downstairs room after that, and after Dad finally left, she took the main bedroom upstairs, but I kept a room downstairs. We never used my old room as a bedroom again, and Mom sold the house literally last week. This was only in 2007 as well. I was 18. I have lived in a town on the East Coast my whole life. It was a small town, and so everybody knew each other. My school holds around 400 students, so it's pretty small. We didn't regularly get new students, but this day in the school year we got 2. They were both girls and were both sophomores, the same as I was at the time. I became friends with one of them, we'll call them Casey. About a year goes by, and we are juniors now in our first semester. It was announced that there was a car crash in the neighborhood next to the city I lived in. The other transfer student that I was not friends with was the victim. It was announced later that day that she had died from her injuries. I wasn't very good friends with her, so it didn't affect me too much. At least not more than a low mood and condolences. What surprised me was that no one else was upset. Not a single one of her friends, teachers, or parents. This is where the unexplainable part comes in. I went to my guidance counselor to talk about what had happened, because the fact that seemingly no one had cared bothered me. I asked him how he felt about the incident, and he said that he hadn't heard the news but was sorry I lost a friend. I told him we weren't close, but I asked if he could look up her name for me, and he told me the girl I was asking for didn't exist in the school records, but I found a student who shared her last name. The student is Casey. But Casey had walked into class the very next day like it was nothing. I still never understood what happened to the other transfer student because there was no record of her wherever I searched. It was still the craziest thing to ever happen to me. I was 19, driving around town with a friend sometime after midnight, talking shit and listening to music. We drive past this road with a signpost to an area neither of us have heard of, despite both of us living in town our whole lives. I asked if she wanted to see where the road went, she said yes, so I pulled a U-turn, and off we went. It's a paved road with heavy trees on each side and a few houses. Nothing unusual for either of us, I was living on a street like that at the time. Anyway, within about 5 minutes, the conversation just kind of dies off. And a few minutes after that, I started to get an uneasy feeling. Then we passed a kangaroo on the side of the road. It remained perfectly still, just turning its head to watch us drive past, and I got the distinct impression it was standing guard. After that, I just got more and more anxious. I ended up turning to my friend and saying, "This is going to sound stupid, but can you?" She was already taking her seatbelt off. "I'll lock the back doors." We kept following the road even after that because we're stubborn craps and don't know when to admit defeat. It was at least half an hour, because my 60-minute cassette tape had flipped over twice, 30 minutes of music on each side, between pulling onto the paved road and coming to a sign saying, "Dirt road ahead." By this stage, I felt physically sick, and my skin was crawling. Without a word, I did the quickest 3-point turn I was able to do, and we headed back down the road. The closer we got back to the turnoff, the better I felt until we were back on the main road, where I felt like I could breathe easily again. We told a few people about it, and they got brushed off mostly. We didn't even drive past that turnoff without flinching or shuddering for a few months, the feeling of dread had been that strong. Then, about 6 months later, she turns to me out of nowhere and says, "Let's drive it during the day." So we went. My friend has both her phone and mine on her lap, with emergency numbers punched in. We're playing upbeat pop music to try to keep us calm. It took us less than 5 minutes to reach the dirt road, and on checking the odometer, the paved section was only 1 kilometer long. Once again, we got the duck out of there. I have never been back. I have no idea what the hell was going on that night, but I can say with certainty that we were not meant to be there. Even 20 years later, if someone mentions the area on the signpost, we shudder, and recently, I turned to her out of nowhere and said, "Hey, was that you with me on the road where?" "Yes. And I don't want to talk about it." I was watching my girlfriend's house while she and the family went on vacation. I was unemployed and hurting for money. They have 2 dogs, a big German Shepherd and a fat black lab, and her mom paid me to watch them, along with various other gifts and food for the week. I lugged my desktop over there with the intent to game with my friends over the week and stay up for all hours. After relaxing with video games and a big screen TV for a day, the German Shepherd starts staring at the bathroom. This dog is very protective and loves me. She's sitting at the foot of the bathroom door, staring directly at the window. They built a covered deck for the house. The bathroom window originally looked over the yard but is now just a window to the deck. Kind of creepy in the dark, but I always lowered the blinds. I see her staring at the window, blinds up, and she's whimpering. I walk towards the window to close the blinds. Maybe she saw a squirrel or a bat and went into protection mode? As I get closer to the window, she charges around me and stands between me and the window. I try to reach for the drawstring, and the dog jumps up and on me to push me back. Even when she's up on me, I try to grab for the drawstring, and she uses her snout to try to push my hand away. I finally close the blinds and sit back down. The German Shepherd remains at the foot of the bathroom door, staring. And that's when I heard it. The blind draw themselves up. Very slow wowie. At this point, the dog is baring its teeth, its hair standing on end. I froze and felt like I couldn't move. From fear. I finally got the nerve to stand up and peek inside the bathroom. The blinds are up. I take one step into the bathroom to go lower them again, and they lower. Again, terrifyingly slow. The drawstring is going up as the blinds go down, but not swaying or dangling. Taut. I take a step back again. I can't describe what I felt. It was this terror. I had just seen something I couldn't rationalize or write off. It's here, in front of my face, happening. I'm staring. Just in shock. The dog is losing its mind and starts whimpering, but it still won't let me walk forward and stands between me and this damn window. It starts slowly lowering itself, then raising itself. It seemed like forever. Finally, the blinds just dropped, real quick, and then nothing. I didn't sleep that night and couldn't leave the dogs, so I just shut that door, moved a heavy cabinet in front of it, and turned on some funny movies for the rest of the night to try to wash my brain. I'm sure there are a million explanations for what happened. But that dog doesn't spook for anything, even if German Shepherds are notoriously skittish and paranoid, and in that moment, it was just surreal. When I was younger, my mom was dating this guy, who we will call JB, and after a few months, he invited my mom, me, and my brother to go with him and his son, about my age, out to his lake house for the weekend. It was right on Lake Michigan but up in a more secluded area, which was pretty awesome. Well, we got up there, and for one, I already felt really creeped out. It was a smaller 2-story house, maybe 3 if you count the really big attic, that had the living room, dining room, and kitchen on the first floor and 2 bedrooms on the second. Midnight-ish, I heard one of the stairs squeak a few times. Figuring it was my mom coming to check to make sure we were asleep, I told his son to be quiet, quickly turned the TV off, and hid under the covers. After not hearing any noise for a few minutes, I looked out from under the covers and saw 3 of the mannequins moving around in the kitchen. Their body parts weren't moving, but they were sliding around the kitchen. I swore I was dreaming but was so terribly frightened that I hid back under the covers with a small yelp and then heard the dragging on the floor coming closer and peeked out, seeing one of them just a few feet from the couch. I hid back under the covers and shut my eyes tight, hoping it would go away. The next morning I got up and tried not to think about it, really hoping it was just a bad dream, but when we went back up to the attic to put the beach stuff back, the mannequins were in different spots and weren't covered in cobwebs anymore. Don't believe me if you don't want to, but it happened, and I've been scared shitless of mannequins ever since. My husband worked for a small old folks home. They only had 3 residents, and his aunt ran the place. I had college classes nearby and would often come hang out for a few hours at the end of his shift and visit with the residents. One night, my husband got the residents to bed and went downstairs to collect his paycheck while I turned off the lights. As I reached the top of the stairs, I was on a hike with my family in Gaspésie, Canada. We were doing wild camping, so there wasn't anybody near us, no little town or even camping sites. We followed this trail for something like 2 hours before reaching what appeared to be a tea house. It was old, quite small, and really didn't feel in place there. In the 2 hours of walking, we hadn't seen one human being besides us. Near the tea house, my little brother pointed out a tree that appeared to have a face. It looked like an old man, which freaked him out a little. I wanted to go in because it looked so cozy, and I was curious. My dad didn't want to, and so we kept walking for another 2 to 3 hours before we started making our way back to our tents. We only turned back on the same path we had been on since the beginning. When arriving at the spot where the tea house was, I was startled to find nothing. There was a little clearing with no trees but no house. I thought we had changed paths, but no, the old man in the tree was right where we'd seen him. Nobody made a comment on that, so I didn't either. But only now am I wondering where it went. This didn't happen to me personally, but to my 6th grade teacher and her husband. I guess a little while after starting a family, they decided to buy a cabin up in northern Ontario, like a little summer getaway sort of deal. They looked around for a bit, trying to find something that would fit their specifications, mostly a place nice and out of the way, not super crowded around a single lake like you see with a lot of cabin properties in Ontario. Anyhow, they eventually found a place that was perfect, about a half-hour drive or so from the nearest town, on its own little lake, and everything. Perfect little spot, and affordable too. See, I guess things first started to get a little strange with the circumstances of how the place came up for sale. It was a property that had been taken back by the bank because its original owner just sort of disappeared. One day he's making payments, the next, the place is abandoned, and he can't be reached anywhere, just gone. And it's not like this was some sort of little shack. I mean, it was a smaller place, but the guy had sunk some serious cash into it with renovations and the like. So they buy the place, move some of their stuff up for the summer, and settle in with their kids. Everything's great, everyone's having a good time. But I guess one day my teacher's sitting in the living room portion of the property, and she realizes something. She grabs the layout plans of the cabin, which they received after purchasing the place, and starts to really look them over. Soon enough, it dawns on her that something's not quite right. See, there's another room marked out on the layout that isn't in the cabin. Or so it looks. She walks over to where the door should be, and it's a wall, but then she realizes that with the angles and lengths and whatnot, there actually might be another little room behind it. So she shows it to her husband, and he's pretty intrigued and says, "Hey, why don't we bust open the wall and see what's behind it?" They had been thinking about redoing the room a bit anyway, so they went right ahead. The boards come down, and true enough, there's a bricked up doorway. Her husband takes a good swing at the bricks with a sledgehammer, and it goes right through. There was another tiny room. Now this is where things really take a turn for the eerie. The room is about the size of a large closet, square, with plain walls and a wood floor, nothing too crazy. It's what's inside of it, though, and that was strange. A single wooden chair, facing away from the door, has a light bulb hanging down from the ceiling directly over it. And on the wall that the chair was facing was a small, painted self-portrait of a man in a dirty wooden frame. The picture was clearly done by an amateur, but it was kind of distorted. The colors were dark, and the guy in it was just staring forward, with these dead, gray eyes and his mouth a little open. It was unnerving, to say the least. They got rid of the contents of the room and actually just ended up boarding it up again. I guess they couldn't find a use for such a small space, or maybe they just still found it too creepy. I dunno. What I do know, however, is that if I were in that situation, I would have burned the ducking cabin down and never looked back. I had a living room in my parents' two-story house that connected to stairs leading to the second floor of the house. You could see completely down the hall on the second floor from the couch in the living room. One time my family went away on vacation, so I had my cousin come over while the house sat for them. I've been alone in this house for a couple of days now, and I just really wanted company. We're sitting on this couch, playing Xbox or something. The stairs leading to the second floor are almost out of my vision. At the very top of the stairs on the left is a doorway leading to a bathroom and nothing else. We were up pretty late gaming when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a gray face lean out and stare at me for a split second. I didn't budge, I just barely noticed it, but as soon as I did, it was gone. I hadn't snapped to look at it, nor did I say anything. I just continued gaming for about 3 seconds until my cousin said, "Did you just see that?" As soon as our eyes connected, we both knew we saw the same thing. The second my cousin said that, I felt my heart sink. It scared the shit out of me to have him pretty much confirm what I saw, but he brushed it off. I had immediately assumed it was just one of those blurs, or darting shadows, you get in the corner of your eyes at times. The creepiest part is that it slid out as if it were lying on the floor. Whatever it was, its head was at level with the top of the steps right at the bottom of the bathroom door frame. It just sort of slid out, stared, then slid back. Again, I just saw it from the corner of my eyes, but it appeared to be gray-skinned with black hair from our combined description. We went up the stairs and checked the whole bathroom, including the insides of the luggage bags in the closet. We never found anything. I was raised by my grandmother, and she would always buy me these porcelain dolls to decorate my room. I liked them, but I wasn't allowed to play with them, I was only allowed to look at them. Also, it should be noted that now that I am an adult, I consider myself a problem child at that time, as I had such a sassy attitude and some anger issues. Well, I was upset about something dumb, and I had an attitude, so I stomped off to my bedroom. I had a couple of these dolls displayed on high shelves that I could not reach without help, and one in particular was a beautiful doll dressed in a wedding gown. As soon as I walked into the room, it flew from the top shelf, across the room, and landed right on my bed. There is no way it could have simply fallen onto my bed as it was on the opposite side of the decently sized room. Had it fallen, it would have landed on the floor. Anyway, I thought the doll flew off the shelf to be played with, so I was playing with it when my grandmother came in and asked how it got off the shelf, and I told her it flew off the shelf onto my bed. Also, in this same house, I woke up many times during the night to my bed shaking like there was an earthquake, But earthquakes were not regular occurrences where I grew up. I also slept, frequently. I would go to sleep in my bed and wake up in the basement or sometimes on the couch. Our basement was fully furnished. Not creepy, BTW. Our playroom and a family living room were in the basement. Yeah, basically, all that stuff stopped after my grandmother died in 2006, but my aunt, who bought the house after my grandmother passed, said that on the day of my grandmother's death, she always smelled her perfume. I was in a pine forest with a friend when we saw smoke a few meters above our heads. Heading towards it, we realized the forest was on fire. Trees are fully ablaze, the kind of runaway fire you don't want to get trapped in. I still remember the sound of hundreds of branches cracking simultaneously and feeling the heat. It was one of the most intense things I'd ever experienced. Obviously, we got in our car and bailed crazy fast, picking up another friend on the dirt road and heading down to the main road. His mission ended on his own a bit earlier. Even way down on the main road, we drove through some really thick smoke. Funny thing though, my friend's dad works in forestry, so he makes a few calls to find out what kind of damage they were looking at, and no one knows a thing about any fires in that area. A week later, we drive back to check out the damage to the area, and nothing's burned. The third guy doesn't remember seeing any smoke on the road either. And it's not like we went back to the wrong area or something, the fire was right next to a big landmark in the area. I live with my family, and we recently moved to a neighborhood in the middle of a lush forest with dirt roads that wind around two small lakes. My mom had been taking long walks in the neighborhood, but there was one thing that baffled her. Near a split in the road is a dead-end sign. My mom had been down that way many times and said that there didn't seem to be a dead end. It just keeps going, she said. There's a house that looks like it should be the end, but when you turn the corner, you see that the road goes around it, and when you pass that, the forest opens up, and you end up with a beautiful, clear view of the lake. A few days ago, I decided to take a walk with her. After we crossed a small bridge, my mom started commenting about how she'd never noticed certain mailboxes or houses before. It wasn't long after that we hit a dead end at a large house. Did we take the wrong turn? She asked. Where's the lake? She looked pretty disturbed as we walked back home and saw that there was no other way we could have gone. Part of me wants to believe she had a vivid dream and got confused, but the first time I heard her talk about the long path was right after she'd gotten home from her walk that day. I have no idea what will happen the next time we go down that way. This happened about 15 years ago. When my partner and I were first dating, we were in their car on the way to a mutual friend's house. We had made the drive between my and the friend's house probably 3x/week that year. We were all extremely close, so it was not an unfamiliar route at all. We were also very familiar with the surrounding area. About halfway through the drive, they make a turn, and we both realize at the same moment that we're about 2 miles away from where we should be and not even on the route. Then I noticed that over an hour had passed since we left my house. The entire drive should have been 15 minutes. We pulled over, tried to rationalize it for a few minutes, and ended up just silently driving to the friend's house. When we told them why we were so late, they said the same thing had happened to them a few times in that neighborhood. What? On a summer's day, I had been out visiting family who lived an hour's drive away, but it wasn't late, and the sun was still in the sky. I drove along the A13, a main road to the east of London, heading towards London. This is a road I know very well and have used hundreds of times. I drove on the overpass, over the slip road, where the road goes towards Tilbury and the docks. I drove past the slip road for Grays. I drove past the slip road where the lakeside, shopping mall, traffic joins the A13, and then I went on to the overpass over the M25 motorway. Except I wasn't there. I was just going over the overpass over the Tilbury slip road, something I had done about 5 kilometers, and about 5 minutes, earlier. I was still behind the same car I had been behind earlier, as far as I know. There was no break in the music I had been listening to. I was too shocked to notice anything about mileage or the current time. I don't drink or use any kind of illegal substance. I was certainly awake and aware. I had the same car for years, no problems with exhaust or carbon monoxide. I have brought the subject up a couple of times, and people have given explanations ranging from a psychotic episode to simply falling asleep at the wheel, but, from my point of view, nothing seems to fit my experience. My friend was staying over at my house for the weekend, and we decided to walk down to the pier at the creek. We left a little before noon and checked the time because her mom was picking her up around 4 and we didn't want to get in trouble. I am absolutely sure we left just a few minutes before noon instead of misreading the clock, because the noon alarm sounded before we got to the road that went to the creek. The noon alarm was a loud siren that the fire department would test every Sunday at 12 o'clock. I think it might have been on a timer because it always happened at noon. The only other use for the siren was for emergencies, like a tornado warning. We turned onto the road that led to the trail to the creek, walked all the way there, messed around doing whatever it was that we did. That's the only part I don't specifically remember, but it's not really that important since nothing strange happened, and then we went home. I think it's probably about 3/4 of a mile to the creek, but I'm not great at estimates. Regardless, we had been gone for at least 2 hours. I have always been a very good judge of how much time has passed, so much so that when I'm cooking food, I don't set an alarm. It's almost a magic power, I'm so good at it. But even if I was horrible at keeping time, it's quite a long walk and would have been impossible to do in 10 minutes. When we returned from the creek, my mom looked at us and said, "Oh, I thought you were going to the creek." We told her that we already did, and I don't think she argued because I was a weird kid and she was a busy mom who did all of her chores on Sundays. When we looked at the clock, it was 12:07. There is no way we could have walked all the way to the creek and back in 10 minutes. I have something that I recently found out from my mom. My older sister and I used to share a room when we were younger. I was 10, she was 16, and we had bunk beds. I would sleep on the top bunk, and we had a long mirror on the wall across, so I was able to see my sister sleeping on the bottom bunk. My sister used to sleepwalk really badly for a period of time in her life. I would wake up and notice she wasn't in bed, and my mother and I would find her just aimlessly walking down our narrow hallway. One creepy incident was when I noticed she had slept again, and instead of grabbing my mom because I felt bad, I decided to get her myself. I searched the whole house and couldn't find her. Eventually I heard muffles from our closet in the bedroom and opened it to her with her chin low and hair in front of her face, ripping one of my jackets. I put her to sleep, and for some reason at the time, it didn't scare me that much. Not sure why, maybe because I was scared I couldn't find my sister? But thinking of it now, it was beyond alarming. Anyway, her sleepwalking got so bad to the point that my mom set up a camera with an alert system in the hallway because she worried she would fall down the stairs at the end of the hallway. I never sleepwalk, at least not from what I know. My mom woke up one night to the noise of the alarm going off and went in the hallway to do her usual grab and direct my sister back to sleep routine. However, she said she saw both me and my sister in the hallway with our hands holding each other's and having our backs to her. Figuring I was awake and not worried, she told me to bring my sister back to bed. I wasn't responding, and I was apparently sleepwalking too. She came over to us, and we were both staring ahead and apparently biting our lips. My mom asked again what we were doing and tried her best to direct us back to our bedroom, with no success. She said we were like rock solid. I was a 10-year-old who weighed probably 60 pounds, and my mom said she couldn't move me at all. Eventually she said we both almost jerked our heads at the same time and looked up to the ceiling above us. We were still holding. Just such a creepy, weird incident. When I was little, my grandmother's house was inhabited by a sweet fairy. We visited often, and when we were leaving, we'd call out to the sweet fairy, and a handful of sweets or candy would rain down on us from the second floor. But when I was around 8 or 9, I started doubting the magic. I'd caught my mom putting together our presents from Santa. I knew the tooth fairy wasn't real, and even the Easter bunny was losing his shine. And the sweet fairy? Well, that couldn't possibly be real. So one day, as we were leaving, my grandmother told us to call the sweet fairy. I told her I knew the sweet fairy was a lie. It was just Gramps throwing sweets down from her sewing room window. Gran called Gramps to come and stand with us. I insisted that everyone in the house join us. Gran and Gramps, Mom and Dad, every adult was present and accounted for. I smugly called the sweet fairy, and a handful of sweets rained down upon us. To this day, I don't know how she did it. Did she slip away and call a neighbor? Had my mom told her I was starting to doubt? Did they plan it together? My mom and grandmother are both gone now, and the mystery will never be solved. But long after I stopped believing in Santa and the Easter bunny, I still carried a little ember of belief in the sweet fairy. So I know I didn't imagine it. Maybe there is some logical and scientific explanation as to why, but in all the years since it happened, I've never found one that fits. Every now and then I check in with them to make sure it did actually happen, and I'm not imagining it. I think it was 2006. My long-distance boyfriend, my sister, and a couple of her friends were sharing an A-frame cabin for Thanksgiving. It was a small place with a kitchen and living room downstairs and 2 small rooms upstairs. There was just one staircase going up into the rooms and a doorway connecting the kitchen and living room. My guy and I are on the couch kissing because we haven't seen each other for a bit, and my sister is cooking in the kitchen. She enters the room, and we stop because we don't want a PDA. She breezes past and goes upstairs. Right when she disappears into the upstairs room, my sister emerges from the kitchen doorway she just came out of and asks us to start making a salad. My boyfriend and I are both very confused because she just walked past and upstairs, and there was no other way for her to come back down without us seeing her. And then the alarm clock upstairs goes off. I ran up and turned it off. I wish I remembered what time it had said. I was weird, though, right? It was like something imitated her form. I used to spend hours every day after school in the woods around my house, as there were miles of woods in all directions except to the north. I was walking to the north, where, if you walked far enough, about a half mile, you'd reach the main highway, which my driveway came off of. We had made this little journey 100 times before, at least, and I knew exactly where I was and where I was going. I have an excellent sense of direction from years of hiking in a forest with no trails, and I should have been around 30 or 40 yards away from the main road, but I hadn't heard traffic in a while, and the forest kept going on and on until I got very uncomfortable and didn't recognize where I was, which was impossible. The woods were still and silent, almost deafeningly silent, except for our footfalls. My dog remained unusually close to me at this point in the hike, and he kept looking up at me, but I was curious and young and wanted to know where the hell I was going, so we pressed on. We came to a large oval field with beautiful green grass, which was very well taken care of. In the middle of the field was a single apple tree. At the far end of the field was a big white house with red shutters and a red door facing us, probably a quarter mile away. As soon as we reached the field, my dog took off running and barking at the tree. I tried to quietly yell at him to come back, but he was on a mission. That's when I got a horrible, heavy feeling in my stomach, and my ears began to feel like they were burning. I had to go, and it was urgent. I called my dog a few more times, then I just said duck it and ran a straight line back to the recognizable woods. Strange things happen here. When I got far enough back where I recognized the landscape, I began to hear traffic behind me in the direction I came. I still kept running until I reached my front yard. I swear this is the absolute truth, and I've never understood how it happened, but when I opened the front door, my dog was waiting inside for me, and I never saw him pass by me on the run back. I remained inside the rest of the day and played video games. I made several attempts to find this place over the next few years but never could. I've gone in every direction around my house for miles, even using maps to try to locate the field, and I can't find anything but forest for miles and the main road to the north. There is a dirt road in the Big Thicket National Preserve in Texas called Backroad. It is completely overgrown with trees and gives the appearance of driving through a long, straight tunnel made of vegetation. I am sure it is a quaint country road on a sunny day, but on a foggy night, it is a different story. Personally, I was far more afraid of a situation like Deliverance than any sort of ghosts or creepy lights. The light began as a barely visible pinpoint at what appeared to be the end of the road. It slowly grew brighter. I was expecting the single light to morph into two as we approached the headlights of an oncoming car. This never happened. The light, which started as an orange-yellow, almost fire-colored, turned a bright white-blue like xenon headlamps. I was struck by how bright the light was. It stayed like this for a full 5 or 10 minutes, long enough to have a substantial conversation with the others in the car about how crazy this was and that maybe we should slow down in case we need to pull over for someone to pass us from the other direction. The road is very narrow. After a time, the light began to recede, almost setting like the sun. Over about 30 seconds, it dropped below the road's horizon and faded entirely. The road continued another mile or so with some twists and turns before opening onto the highway, which was deserted. I really can't explain it. The only thing that remotely makes sense is that it was another car with a huge spotlight, driving away from us at our same rate before speeding up and disappearing from view, and this is an extreme stretch. I have read articles about luminous swamp gases and ignis fatui, but none of them offer a sound explanation. One night, myself and some friends decided to go partake in a little bit of urbex. A little after midnight, we made our way up the stairs of the dilapidated Tedman's dormitories, when we decided to stop on the first floor to wander along the remaining floorboards a little. Myself and another guy ended up halfway down the corridor and in an old room. I should say that the night was very clear, with only a very gentle breeze, enough to produce a minute of continuous rustle from the polythene used to cover most of the windows. Anyway, the guys who remained in the stairwell called us back urgently, saying they heard someone downstairs. There are occasionally security measures to keep vandals out, etc. We go back and then convince the others that it was nothing and we should go upstairs. On the second floor, half the group is getting quite freaked out and jumpy, so myself and another skeptic decide to shout hello, anyone there and such like. The scariest moment of my life, as soon as I finished shouting, from directly above us, there was a loud scraping sound like something heavy being dragged along a slightly gravelly floor. Thinking it to be a disturbed pigeon, we shout some more, To the exact same response. We peg it down the stairs, but stop on the bottom floor to recompose and just generally say, WTF? So one of the guys trying to show off, I suppose, decides to say, anybody there? At just above speaking level. The sound comes from directly above us, as if something had come down the stairs again, and is followed by a slight thump. Absolutely terrified, we push past each other. We are mostly 18 to 19-year-old guys and a couple of girls, trying to get out of the place. It was about 11 p.m., and I had just left this girl's house. I was still in her neighborhood, and I had just started my truck and began to drive away. As I'm driving away from her house and down the street, I see some sort of odd shape come into view in front of the truck. Naturally, I started to slow down so I didn't hit whatever was moving along the road, but the longer I stared at it, the less sense it made to me. Upon first glance, I thought it was something blowing in the breeze due to its odd movement, but I realized right away that it was something living. What I'm about to describe isn't going to make much sense, but it's exactly what I saw, and I got a good long look at it too. It had brown fur. I could see that it had a limb of some sort that it was dragging itself along with, but it didn't look right. I saw flesh, distinctly the bright red muscle tissue amidst the brown fur, but there was no blood or any indication that this thing was injured. I couldn't even see a face, a head, or any sort of facial feature. It literally looked like a small dog or cat was cut in half, but there was no blood, and the thing was just kind of slunking across the street. I had slowed down all the way to a stop, and I just sat there and stared at this thing for a second in my headlights, watching it move slowly in front of my car across the street. After a moment, my brain kind of just registered that what I was seeing didn't look natural. I remember feeling really weird looking at this thing, and so I just started driving because I started to question the reality of what I was seeing. After I drove away and calmed down a little bit, I thought about turning around and investigating it further, trying to take some pictures, but at that point I felt like I was a little too far away to turn around, so I just kept going home. I really wish I would have turned around that night. Maybe it would have still been there for me to take pictures of, and I could have physical validation for what I saw, but I feel like I saw enough. This wasn't a shadow being that turned the corner of a hallway for a split second. This thing crawled in front of my truck, and I stopped in the road just to get a clear look at what it was, and I realized after about a minute that whatever it was looked unnatural and very strange, and I felt like I needed to drive away to shut myself off to such strangeness, which I regret because it's fascinating. About 4 years ago, I lived in this fairly small flyspeck of a town. At the time, I had lived there for about 12 years, so I knew my way around. Our house was about 1.5 miles away from the nearest neighborhood. Our mom intentionally picked that house due to the lack of neighbors. It was tucked away on a back road, with the woods surrounding it. Every now and again, I liked to take walks with my little brother, who at the time was about 13. We decided to do just that. We headed up the road and decided to try to find a new path or a new clearing that we hadn't discovered yet, when we noticed something a little shocking. Just off the road that led almost directly to the neighborhood, there was a brand new paved road. Every road in that part of town was a gravel road, so seeing an out-of-place paved road was pretty unusual. We stared at it for a while and came to the conclusion that it must have been made within the last few days, due to the modern but slow growth of the town. However, we had no explanation for how they did it so fast. We decided to explore it a bit. I remember that as soon as we set foot on the road, the air became notably colder, by at least 5 degrees. The road itself was black pavement with no dividing lines. It was surrounded by some thick, red trees that resembled redwoods, but they were too short and not native to our state, southern Arkansas. We walked on the road for about 3 miles until we decided to head back due to it getting dark. When we got off the road, we felt the temperature go back up. My brother and I agreed to explore it the next day. At roughly noon the following day, we set back out to explore this place, only to discover that the entire road was now missing. When I say missing, I mean the trees that were cleared to make it had apparently grown back, with no sign of the redwood-like trees. We even began to explore the woods once more, but only to find no sign that they ever existed. When we asked our parents about it, they said they knew nothing about any new road work being done near us. I'm from southeastern Pennsylvania, and my roommate and I had made plans to head down to Maryland for a weekend in the summer to visit her family and have a little vacation on the bay side of the state. We leave early on a Friday morning. I was driving my roommate and her girlfriend. We're in the back along with another chick whose boyfriend was up front next to me in the passenger seat. We get going, and after about 40 minutes, we are on the road that will take us within about 10 miles of our family's place without having to turn. We know there is no need to turn off this road for a few hours because we have made the trip before and noted the ease of this route. Anyway, We've been driving for about an hour when all of a sudden we hit a dead-end street with a couple houses on it that just ends with a wooden barricade, and behind that is just a large field. We are all thoroughly confused, as every person in the car is certain we made no turns and did not veer off at any forks in the road. Checking the map on my phone, we somehow got turned around, and instead of heading south, we ended up far west of our intended route. It took us about 40 minutes out of the way, and the truly strange thing is that to get back to the road we thought we were supposed to be on, it took a handful of turns that required stopping at signs. There's just no way we could have done all that without noticing the turns, and none of us felt like we experienced a time shift. Must have hit some strange backroad vortex? My husband and I were chased or followed by two skinwalkers about 8 or 9 months ago. We were in the Sandwash/Mesa off-roading area at the time. My husband saw something up ahead, so we slowed down a bit, thinking it may have been an animal because he mentioned that it was fast as duck. I thought he was screwing with me, but when we passed that trail, there were two girls standing there, staring at us. As we drove past, I wondered why they were there all alone. It just didn't sit right with me, so I turned to my husband to say something, and he was wearing this look of absolute terror. He yelled, "Oh God, they're gaining on us," while looking into the mirrors. I don't think I really understood what he meant. Everything kind of went slow and motiony. I saw how scared he was, looked in my mirror, seeing nothing, then twisted to look out the rear window, and there they were, not even 50 feet from us and gaining. My husband stomped on the gas, and soon after, the dust that had been kicked up made it impossible to see anything. We drove around for about an hour, trying to really figure out what we had just seen. We went home, got ready for bed, and that should have been it. Except neither of us could sleep, so we watched a little TV. I must have ended up dozing off because the next thing I remember, I heard something, opened my eyes, and saw two relatively small shadows at our sliding back door. I thought it had been a nightmare, so I didn't mention anything until my lunch break the next day, and my husband responded, "It wasn't a dream. I saw them too." A few months later, weird things started happening around our house. Finding small bones outside, the smoke alarm in our bedroom went off for no reason, while the smoke alarm in the hallway was fine. Batteries were changed, and it still happened, cupboards being opened, a saucer laying in the middle of the kitchen floor, that would have surely broken if pushed off the counter, weird dreams, my husband hearing me call his name when I didn't, or vice versa. Not many of those things can be related to skinwalker activity, so it left me a bit baffled. I still hear things from time to time from other rooms, but nothing like it had been. I walked through the time continuum, and it was mundane. So, I'm 14 at the time. Maybe 15. And my friend is over, we're jamming and playing music. Eat some mac and cheese. Drink some coffee. Decide to walk up to the park. At the moment, I'm living on the outskirts of a county. Mostly woods. But there's this park that leads to a series of creeks and streams gifted by a natural spring, Ikekenfina. It's about noon at this point. 11:44, to be exact. The repeating numbers stick in my head to this day. The park is about 4 miles up the road, and we head out. Get there and decide to explore the woods for no good reason. We start walking through paths or following creeks. Generally having a really fun time. We come across this single-family home in the middle of the woods, in pristine condition, but with no ins or outlets. Just this bizarre, seemingly inaccessible house in the middle of nowhere. We laugh about it and move on. It's been a few hours, we're hot, itchy, and ready to head home, so we backtrack. It doesn't take long to realize we have no clue where we are or how to get back. We pass cell phones. But no. Empty house. Go inside to see how long we were lost, and the clock reads 11:52. I still talk to this friend often. This is nearly 30 years later, and every once in a while one of us will bring up the time we got lost and stumbled through the time continuum. Myself and a friend were driving around the Chicagoland area, smoking weed, and just generally having a good time when we decided to drive through these woods. There was a dirt road that stretched about 5 miles or so through a heavily wooded area in a fairly large city. We decided to cruise on it. It was about 11:30 at night. We were a few miles deep into the woods at this point, high off our asses, when we were starting to get a little freaked out, not only because we were driving through a heavily secluded area so late at night, but because the car we were driving was on its last legs at that point, so the possibility of having to come to a stop was likely. About 3 miles or so into the woods, we hit this turn in the dirt road. When standing on the bank of the curve, just off to the side of the road, we see a very elderly gentleman who looked to be somewhere in the 65 to 75-year-old range, wearing an extremely bright blue dress shirt, just staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. Mind you, at this point we were ducking deep in these woods, literally no sign of human life anywhere for miles in either direction. I'll never be 100% sure. But the more we discussed it, the less we were able to find any logical explanation as to why that man would be standing there. I've concluded that this man was likely a phantom hitchhiker, perhaps looking for a ride back to a loved one.